On that November afternoon, the chill wasn't coming from the autumn air, it was coming from my own sister, Victoria. She didn't hesitate or lower her voice when she looked at me, holding little Michael and Ivy by my side, and said, "You know where you belong," as she pointed toward the dim, concrete garage. The grand dining room beyond her arm was bathed in golden light, its crystal chandelier sparkling above a long table set for relatives who welcomed polished plates and fine china. In her hand, though, was only a flimsy paper platter for me and my children. Holding that thin cardboard in my gloved hands, I felt a familiar ache, the weight of every Thanksgiving past, when I'd stood there in my second-hand dress, hoping for a nod of approval that never came. I met Michael's wide, steady gaze and felt Ivy's small fingers curl around mine. Neither child protested. They simply followed me through the side door. Inside the garage, gasoline fumes mixed with dust, and a single folding table waited against the far wall, flanked by two metal chairs and an upturned cardboard box. No warmth, no celebration, just the echo of forks scraping plastic. As I led them to our makeshift seat, a resolve settled over me. I would no longer beg for a place at a table that refused to notice my worth. For years, I'd hoped that smiling through their disdain would change their hearts. But today, the cold glint in Victoria's eyes taught me that belonging isn't given, it's earned, sometimes from unexpected places. And in that moment, I knew this Thanksgiving would mark more than another year of rejection. It would be the start of my own reckoning. That afternoon in the garage, as Michael folded his hands in his lap and Ivy poked at the mashed sweet potatoes with polite restraint, something inside me shifted. For years I had tiptoed around my sister's sense of superiority, plastering on a smile, adjusting my tone to sound more refined, praying that my worn boots and second-hand dress wouldn't betray my place in the family hierarchy. But watching my children sit erect in folding metal chairs, their faces illuminated by the cold light of a bare bulb, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. In their silence, there was dignity, and in that dignity was the truth I had long refused to speak aloud. Begging to belong was a betrayal of my own worth. I could still hear the faint echo of laughter and clinking wine glasses from the dining room, but it no longer pierced me with shame. Instead, it sounded like the closing of a door I'd spent too many holidays trying to wedge open. Beneath the dusty oil cans and discarded cardboard boxes, I saw my own reflection, someone who had scrimped and saved, worked double shifts at the pediatric clinic, and stayed up past midnight writing freelance articles simply to keep the lights on. My hands had grown calloused from washing endless dishes. My heart had grown weary from yearning for a nod of approval that never came. Today, I realized, I was done performing for an audience that had already made up its mind. I looked across the makeshift table at Ivy's small, determined face. She believed in magic autumn leaves, her own lopsided drawings, the comforting hum of our modest apartment heater. But she had never believed that a seat at the table meant true acceptance. And Michael, the solid 12-year-old who had learned to swallow tears behind clenched jaws, looked at me with sober eyes that said he understood far more than he let on. At that moment, as I took in the scent of motor oil mingled with stale cardboard, I felt a surge of protective pride. Their dignity became my mirror. And in that reflection, I saw the mother I needed to be, without a word. I rose and cleared the flimsy paper plates from the table's edge. My fingers brushed against Ivy's as she reached for mine, and I felt her small reassurance like an ember in the cold. I realized that belonging wasn't a matter of bloodline or proximity to polished silverware. It was a matter of mutual respect and shared love. I had spent too long shrinking to fit inside my sister's world. It was time to expand my own. As I guided my children toward the side door, the weight of all those silent Thanksgiving dinners lifted from my shoulders. I no longer needed to earn someone else's approval. I was enough. By the time we reached the crisp air outside, I stood taller than I had in years. The garage door closed behind us with a reassuring thud, sealing off the hollow drama inside. Ahead lay a future of my own, making a kitchen filled with laughter rather than judgment, and a table set for people who would never confuse my presence with a scrap. In that moment, I discovered that true belonging begins the second you stop asking for permission to occupy space and choose, instead, to claim it. That gray November afternoon, as I settled my children into the cold concrete garage, the last thing I expected was a scene straight out of a movie. The echoes of laughter and clinking crystal from inside my sister Victoria's dining room faded into an oppressive silence, broken only by the scrape of plastic forks on paper plates. Michael, my thoughtful 12-year-old, sat rigidly on a metal folding chair, jaw clenched in that familiar effort to hold back tears. Ivy, at 9, traced circles in the dust on the table, her small hand trembling as she clutched her sweet potato pie. I forced a smile, determined to shield them from my own shame, but then everything changed. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw headlights wash over the cracked driveway. The noise of a powerful engine hummed, drawing the attention of the entire household. Through the garage's narrow window, I glimpsed the silhouettes of relatives pressing against the living room windows, their faces etched with curiosity. But the car didn't pull up to the grand entrance. Instead, it circled around to the side, coming to a smooth stop at our garage door. The engine cut off, and for a moment, the world held its breath. When the garage door creaked up, a woman stepped out of a sleek black limousine. She was tall and elegant, dressed in a long navy wool coat that reminded me of a time when I, too, felt that kind of confidence. Her hair was silver-streaked but styled in soft waves, and her eyes shone with purpose. She paused on the threshold, took in our makeshift table, and smiled warmly, as if she were greeting old friends. "Excuse me," she said in a calm, confident voice that carried all the way into the dining room. "I'm looking for the owner of this house." I stood up, heart pounding, around me. Forks dropped and conversation died in mid-sentence. My mother, Elaine, still perched on the edge of the couch inside, looked up from her Chardonnay with surprise. My sister Victoria's perfect posture froze, a stack of crystal glasses clinking gently as she grasped the table beside her. I crossed the narrow space between us. "That would be my sister," I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. "She's inside." The woman tilted her head and smiled directly at me. "No, I believe you're Callie Rivers." I swallowed hard. The garage's chill seeped through my coat, but her gaze felt like sunshine. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm Margot Ellington," she said, extending her hand. "I founded Women Forward, and I remember your work about 5 years ago. You volunteered at our shelter and wrote those blog posts afterward, raw, honest, beautifully written. Memories flooded me nights spent on a friend's couch after I left my husband, scraping together every penny to feed my children, volunteering late into the evening just to feel useful. I had never imagined that someone had noticed or remembered." Margot continued. "You have a gift for making people feel seen. We're hosting our national summit next spring, and we'd be honored if you'd open the event as our keynote speaker. We'll cover your travel, accommodations, childcare, everything. And we'd like to offer you a publishing contract so the world can hear your story." As she spoke, I glanced back toward the house. I could almost see my sister's lips parting in shock, my mother's hand trembling around her glass. Distant echoes of gossiping cousins frozen mid-gesture. For years, I'd chased a seat at their table, shrinking myself to fit their expectations. Perfect mother, dutiful daughter, quiet success story. But here was someone offering me a different kind of invitation, not to be neglected, but to be celebrated. Michael stepped closer, eyes bright with disbelief. "She wants you to speak." Ivy looked up at me, hope shining on her face. "Because of your writing." Margot crouched so she was level with them. "Because your mom is extraordinary." In that moment, the garage's concrete walls seemed to vanish. I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years, pride, acceptance, the quiet roar of self-worth. I took Margot's hand, my fingers entwining with hers, and nodded. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I'd be honored." As we walked toward the limousine, Michael gathered our leftover pie, cradling it like precious cargo. Ivy slipped her hand into mine, her small fingers warm against my glove. Behind us, the curtains in the dining room remained parted, revealing faces flushed with confusion and, I suspected, a dawning realization. That day, the world showed up in a limousine to remind me who I was, and for the first time, I didn't need anyone's permission to occupy space. I had earned it. The moment Margot Ellington introduced herself, the weight of years spent feeling invisible lifted from my shoulders. She stepped forward, the polished wood of her limousine door closing with a definitive click behind her, and offered me a hand, not a stray scrap of a paper plate, but a firm, respectful handshake. "Callie Rivers," she said, her voice steady as a warm embrace. "I founded Women Forward 5 years ago, and I've been following your volunteer work and those blog posts you wrote afterward. You have a gift for making people feel seen." She paused, letting her words settle in the cold November air. In that silence, I remembered those late nights typing by the glow of a laptop screen in a cramped friend's spare room. My cheeks pressed against the window pane as I tried to keep my 2 kids asleep in the next room. I recalled the fear that my writing would disappear into the void, just a personal record of struggle, not something anyone would ever read. But Margot had read it. She had carried it with her and found it powerful enough to track me down on Thanksgiving Day of all days. "We're hosting our national summit next spring in Chicago," she continued, "and we'd be honored if you'd be our keynote speaker. We'll cover your travel, your lodging, even childcare for Michael and Ivy. More than that, we want to offer you a publishing contract so your story can reach every corner of this country. For a heartbeat." I couldn't breathe. Then I saw Michael's eyes widen and Ivy's small hand tighten around mine. In their faces, I saw hope, something I'd almost forgotten was possible. Margot smiled. "Your voice matters. Callie, it deserves to be heard." Behind us, the heavy garage door blocked out the opulent dining room, where my sister and mother sat frozen in shock, with one hand still in mine. Margot reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. She pressed it into my hands, an official invitation, embossed with the Women Forward logo and detailed outlines of event dates, speaking fees, and deadlines. "I know what it's like to work in the shadows," Margot said. "But it's the quiet fighters, the single moms, the volunteers, the ones who keep going when no one is watching, who inspire real change. Chicago needs you." Tears welled in my eyes as I pictured standing on a stage, not as Victoria's sister or Elaine's daughter, but as Callie Rivers' writer, advocate, survivor. I saw the faces of women in that auditorium, CEOs, teachers, retirees leaning forward to hear the truth behind every word. I pictured Ivy scribbling in her own notebook at home, and Michael lifting his chin a little higher, knowing his mother had finally claimed her worth. "Thank you," I managed, my voice unsteady but filled with conviction. I stepped forward, embracing Margot. In that instant, the concrete and oil-stained cardboard of the garage melted away. What remained was clarity. My story was never meant to be confined to that dark corner. It was destined for brighter stages, hungrier ears, and a wider world that finally saw me. And as Margot guided us toward the waiting limousine, I realized that the real gift Wasn't the contract or the summit, it was the permission I'd given myself to be seen. That afternoon, as we climbed into the back of Margot Ellington's sleek limousine, I felt the old weight of obligation and shame slip from my shoulders like an ill-fitting coat. For decades, I'd driven up that long, winding driveway in my sensible boots, praying for a moment of genuine warmth, a stray smile, a flicker of recognition in Victoria's grand foyer. I'd imagined that if I polished my voice, smoothed my hair just so, and brought the right casserole to Thanksgiving dinner, somehow I might earn a permanent place at that table. But as the garage door clicked shut behind us, I realized I was done begging. Michael tucked the last of the sweet potato pie into the seat beside him, handling the leftovers as carefully as if they were heirloom china. Ivy pressed her cheek against the cool leather upholstery, peering out the tinted window at our old garage, its concrete floor forever stained by oil and dust. The lonely folding table that had been our only company for far too long. The sight might once have flamed the embers of humiliation in my chest. Now it felt like a final goodbye. I placed a gentle hand on Ivy's shoulder. "We're heading home. Sweetie," I whispered. "Home is just enough." Home was our cozy 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, where the thermostat was set low enough to save money, but high enough to keep laughter ringing off the walls. It was a place where mismatched mugs sat on open shelves, where the light bulb in the hallway flickered stubbornly, and where every piece of furniture carried a memory of our resilience. Margot leaned forward from her seat across from us. "You did the right thing today," she said, her voice as steady as the Chicago breeze that rattled the window. "It takes courage to walk away from a door that will never open fully." Her eyes glimmered with understanding. She'd walked that path herself, when she founded Women Forward in her early 40s, stepping away from corporate boardrooms that valued profit over people. I closed my eyes for a moment, recalling the glances of confusion and hurt on Victoria's face when she realized the spotlight had shifted. My mother, Elaine, had barely had time to set down her wine glass before Margot's limousine engine roared to life and my life rolled right past her drawing room window. Elaine's "Hope you're well" message that morning had dripped with expectation that I'd slip into my usual role of dutiful daughter. Instead, I chose my own role: an author, a speaker, a mother who refused to be diminished. As we emerged onto the boulevard, I thought about the years I'd spent shrinking to fit someone else's idea of family. I'd practiced my laugh in the mirror, reined in my opinions, and swallowed disappointment raw, all in the name of kinship. But true family, I realized, isn't defined by bloodlines alone. It's forged by shared respect and unconditional love. I finally had a seat at a table that valued my voice and my story. Michael exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm proud of you." At 12 years old, he was already taller than me, with an earnestness in his eyes that carried as much weight as any compliment. Ivy reached across and brushed his arm. "Me too," she added, her 9-year-old voice trembling with emotion. In that moment, their pride became my anchor. Margot turned to me, smiling. "Next spring's summit will be in a historic theater downtown. You'll step onto that stage not as Victoria's sister or Elaine's daughter, but as Callie Rivers, the woman who turned her garage into a launch pad." I pictured the auditorium lights, the expectant hush of hundreds of women leaning forward, hungry for a story of quiet courage. I could almost hear their applause. Outside, the city lights winked on as dusk fell. The limousine's smooth ride felt like a promise of new beginnings. I knew that building my own table wouldn't be without challenges. There would be deadlines to meet, speeches to write, and nights when doubt crept back in. But I also knew that with Michael and Ivy by my side, and with Margot's unwavering support, I would never again question my right to occupy space. When the car pulled up outside our apartment building, I opened the door and let the cool autumn air fill the cabin. I breathed in deeply and turned to my children. "Welcome home," I said. And in their bright smiles, I saw the unshakable truth we belonged together, in a place of our own making. That Thanksgiving morning, Callie awoke before dawn in her cozy brick bungalow on Maple Street, the warm glow of the oven light spilling into the kitchen as she slid the golden brown turkey onto a platter and brushed it with melting butter, its skin crackling invitingly at 325 degrees, just like her grandmother used to do. Around her, the air was filled with the comforting aroma of sage and rosemary, mingling with the laughter that drifted in from the living room where Michael, now 13, was arranging mismatched pillows on the sofa, and Ivy, 10 and impossibly bright, was setting out hand-painted place cards for their guests, in place of the polished chandeliers and crystal stemware of her sister's estate. She draped strings of honey-white fairy lights above a reclaimed wood table, its surface dressed in a patchwork of vintage quilts that held stories of their own. Neighbors, old friends from church, and a handful of colleagues from the clinic, people who had cheered her on through late-night writing sessions and pinch-penny budgets filed in, each bearing a dish, a sweet potato casserole topped with marshmallows, green beans tossed in bacon fat, buttery Parker House rolls fresh from the oven, and a pecan pie that still crackled when sliced. No one asked where they belonged or whether they had enough standing to sit at the table. Here. Every guest was family by choice. Callie's mother, Elaine, arrived clutching a thermos of hot apple cider, her eyes soft with a quiet pride that replaced last year's distant judgment. As the clock chimed noon, Callie lifted her glass of sparkling cranberry juice and asked everyone to share one thing they were thankful for. Michael spoke of a mentor who encouraged his art. Ivy whispered thanks for the days she still believed the world was mostly good. And Elaine, her voice thick with gratitude, thanked Callie for showing her what true belonging could feel like, under the gentle glow of the lights, with laughter echoing off the walls and the aroma of warm bread lingering in every corner. Callie realized that this was the Thanksgiving she had yearned for all her life, a table built not on obligation or inheritance, but on respect, love, and the shared understanding that sometimes the greatest gifts are the ones we create for ourselves. When we find ourselves seated at life's margins, be it a literal garage table or the metaphorical sidelines of a family gathering, it can feel as though our worth is defined by a chair we're never offered. But true belonging isn't handed out by birthright. It's built with intention, respect, and love. Think of Sandra, a retired school teacher who, after years of enduring polite exclusion at holiday meals with her relatives, decided to host her own gratitude gathering. She invited neighbors she'd taught, friends from book clubs, and her grandchildren's music teacher, people who saw her value every day. Around that circle, she discovered something profound when you stop shrinking to fit someone else's table and instead invite those who honor your presence. You claim a space that reflects your true worth. In real life, this means investing in relationships that uplift you, speaking up when you're overlooked, and celebrating the unique gifts you bring, whether it's kindness, wisdom, or simply a listening ear. For us, especially those of us in our golden years, it's a reminder that our story's full of hard-won lessons, laughter, and resilience deserve to be shared in communities that cherish authenticity over obligation. So today, ask yourself who's at your table and who might you welcome to fill its share in the comments. One way you've built your own circle of support. And if this message resonated with you, please subscribe for more stories and practical inspiration. Let's continue to create tables where every seat is earned, every voice is heard, and every heart is honored.